Hello, my name is Joan Antoniello, and welcome to our edition of Mazars Take 5. Today, our conversation is going to be with Rebecca Provder. Rebecca is a partner at Moses Singer, and she is in the family and matrimonial practice area. So we're going to be talking today about the effect of COVID-19 and if Rebecca has seen any rise in divorces. Before we start, Rebecca, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you evolved into this particular field of law, which I've worked with you before, and it's extremely interesting.
So first of all, good morning, Joan, and thank you so much for including me in the discussion
Oh, you're welcome.
today. I appreciate it. So as you had mentioned, I am a partner in the matrimonial and family law practice group at Moses Singer, which is a mid-sized firm in New York City. I handle all types of matrimonial matters, from prenuptial, postnuptial agreements, divorces, both negotiated and litigated, as well as custody cases and mediations. I have always worked in this area. I think I was particularly drawn to it because I've always had an affinity to dealing with people. And as many of you know, divorce is one of the most stressful life events that people can face. As a divorce attorney, I find it very rewarding to be able to help walk people through this very difficult time in their life.
And you're also even-tempered, which is a good attribute that I've always appreciated in you. So tell us a little bit about if you think divorces are increasing because of COVID-19. We're in the 8th month of this, and there's pandemic fatigue. So tell us a little bit about what you're seeing in your practice.
So I definitely think there has been a spike in the number of divorces. I think we're spending more time at home and with our significant others than we have perhaps ever spent before. Sometimes both people working from home, and so you see somebody that you didn't necessarily see before, and so a lot of people are reacting in that way. And so small things sometimes can be exacerbated and made into bigger things. What I've also been seeing is certain underlying issues that have already existed in the marriage have taken a bigger center stage. So for example, whether that is drinking issues, arguments, one person not pulling their weight, those types of issues seem to be coming more to the forefront during these times. I've interestingly received a number of several recent phone calls where and one in particular where somebody had remarked that there's nothing particularly wrong with their marriage, not a bad guy, it's just so-so. And given everything that's going on, they've reevaluated everything and they sat there and said, is so-so really okay for me? Maybe I want more. And so I think it's doing a real change in people's evaluations of themselves and their life and what they want to see for the next chapter.
And then you add to that the effects of unemployment, financial issues, working from home, as you said, seeing this person 24 hours a day for the first time in a long time, caring for children, and the death of loved ones. So all of a sudden you have this explosion of factors that are extremely stressful. Are you seeing that has contributed a lot, especially unemployment and financial issues?
Definitely, I think that has been a big stressor for a lot of people. Money always can be an issue in relationships, particularly on the downside. So I think the pandemic has had a very, very far-reaching impact on many different people, whether they have been furloughed, laid off, taken big hits to their salary, and then that stress itself rolls over into the relationship, causing further issues. So that imposes new issues for couples who are divorcing and courts to take a look at. So for example, there has been an increase in the applications for modifications of support. And one of the issues, and both decisions that have been in existence for a long time and those that are currently pending right now, temporary support awards. And so what the courts have to grapple with is those genuine cases of people who really have taken a hit, who either been laid off or had taken that big salary cut and really need the aid of the court to reduce their obligations, versus people who are trying to game the system. And so, for example, I had one recently where a spouse tried, with an ongoing divorce, a spouse tried to claim that they should be entitled to a modification of support based upon a salary reduction. However, we had argued back, it was a very small amount and it was temporary in nature. It lasted a couple months. And so there was no modification that was granted. And so the current support provisions remain. And it also opens up a whole new chapter in terms of how do you even calculate support right now, both child support and spousal maintenance, if you may be earning a lower income than you otherwise may have been earning before and may earn in the future down the road. So these are just a few of the issues. As well as another one to think about is we're now, many of us, homeschooling our children. Impact parents and their ability to work. So, for example, in a situation where you have a homemaker, what happens there if you can't go and get a job, even if you wanted to now, because you have children to homeschool? And so I think this will play an interesting role into what happens in terms of maintenance. Because the dialogue has shifted to the idea behind spousal support to be durational, to get people on their feet. But you've been out of the workforce 10, 15, 20 years. It's so hard to get a job, not to mention in this economic climate. So I think these are just a few of the many issues that will present themselves down the road.
So what can individuals do, having just said that, especially women, to protect themselves in a divorce? And we know that very often women are the ones mostly affected in a divorce. And you talked about maintenance and you talked about homeschooling. So what can individuals do to protect themselves?
So I still find particularly many women who are just in the dark about the finances. So the first thing I'd say is the simplest. Look at what's around you. Pay attention to the tax returns, look through it, ask questions, don't just sign off on it. Take a look at the bank accounts on a regular basis, same with credit card statements. Meet with the financial advisors and don't feel intimidated about asking questions to them. So that's one of the easiest steps. But it's also difficult in the sense where oftentimes people develop patterns. And so one may take the lead and spearhead the handling of the finances. And so it's going to feel unfamiliar and new to them. So I would strongly suggest, though, just do your best, start looking at what's around you, and you'll find hopefully that people will help you navigate through the process. And in addition, it's helpful to consult with your advisors and say to them, you know, where you're coming from, that you would just like to feel a little bit more involved, and if they can please help you walk through them.
Yeah, it's interesting. I always encourage my female clients to take an inventory of their financial assets and stay as actively involved as possible, so there are no surprises somewhere down the line. Many weddings have been postponed because of COVID-19. Any advice that you can give couples, for example, relooking at their prenup, having a prenup, anything that they can do now that they have the time because their wedding has been delayed to make sure they're doing it right?
So this is an excellent question, Joan. So I think people are having weddings that they never anticipated in this manner, small, large weddings turning into small gatherings, and dates just keep, getting pushed back further and further. So I think this is an opportunity for people to get the prenuptial agreement if they want it and get it out of the way. Even if they're thinking about doing it next year, this is something better done way in advance rather than on the heels of the wedding date anyhow. So it's something you can do, set aside, and then deal with all of the wedding planning on as it gets closer. Now, one thing of note that I would suggest that people think about is, as a result of these big weddings getting delayed and into a unknown period of time in the future, people instead are saying, I have no idea when this is going to end, so let me just do something more casual. But one thing that a lot of people don't know is that it varies as to state law what is the requirement for a valid wedding. And so, for example, yes, you don't need a marriage license in New York necessarily for the marriage to be valid. And so what I have heard in recent several times is, I just want to do something casual, have our officiant, we'll have a few witnesses, and then we'll get married later. Like, wait a second, you can't do that unless you really intend to get married, because that does open the door to still constitute a valid marriage, even if you don't have the license. So it's very important to think about what you're entering into, ask your advisors, and to plan accordingly.
That's an excellent point. That's something that I never knew. So that's great advice. In closing, we never like to see divorces happening. It's just a sad situation for families. So what can individuals do before seeking the advice of an attorney?
I think particularly in these times right now, it's very important to think that this is going to be temporary. It's not going to be forever, where we're going to be 24/7 with our partner, and that things may return to some type of normal down the road. And so to really evaluate, have these just been new sprouting issues, or for a long time in the mix? I encourage people to seek the advice of perhaps a marriage counselor, or to really just step back and evaluate the situation. And then another thing that I think is very helpful, and I do quite routinely, is when people are on the fence, they have just a consultation with myself, so that they can get a better feel of the rights and obligations that they may have if they do enter into a divorce, as well as a better sense of the procedure and which procedure may work for them. So oftentimes having that information makes them feel more secure walking into the future and helping to make those decisions, because obviously it's a big life change.
It is a big life change, especially during these difficult times. Rebecca, I wanted to also congratulate you on the birth of Julia in June. Your COVID-19 pregnancy, which we discussed briefly, was quite an interesting event. So she's a healthy, beautiful baby. So we've seen pictures, so we want to say congratulations. And Rebecca, thank you so very, very much for today's session. And we wish you all the best. Stay healthy, stay safe, and also to all our friends and clients out there, stay healthy and stay safe. And thank you.
Thank you very much, Joan.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thank you. 1 year soon. Not for a divorce.